Welcome to one more edition of Spotlight discussion. We will be trying to decode today about the major takeaways from recently held Trump-Putin summit meeting in Alaska, trying to understand what it means for United States, what it entails for Russia, and what it means for Ukraine and its European friends and allies. And of course, what it means for India. If one has to look at the bigger picture, one could call it a summit which was high on optics, but not so much on substance. To begin with, it looked like that the red carpet welcome of President Putin by President Trump at the joint military base was full of friendly vibes. Both chose to ride in the same US presidential limousine called the Beast, again indicating a certain bonhomie between the two. This was followed by 3 hours of intense discussions and even a press briefing at end of it. It even indicated the possibility of a next summit, and President Putin invited President Trump to the next summit meeting in Moscow. President Trump indicated that being a possibility, but definitely mentioned that the follow-up summit meeting will take place soon. So in that sense, it kind of started a process. But of course, given the expectations, particularly from the American side, of clinching a kind of a ceasefire, undertaking territorial swaps, those things did not happen. Also, what did not happen was other expected items on their agenda, which could be broad-based focus on resetting bilateral relations, to more specifics like recasting economic relations. But more important, I think there was also hope that the two would start talking about arms control, about their New START treaty, which currently puts a ceiling of about 1,550 nuclear warheads on both sides. That treaty was extended for 5 years in 2020-21 and is expected and is due to expire in February of next year. And none of those discussions, of course, took place. We noticed, as usual, President Trump used several superlatives to describe their summit meeting as productive, saying that they had agreed on several tough issues and some of those were still remaining. And therefore, I think it's a mixed signal that one gets that the process has kick-started and will continue. But given the initial maximum pressure strategy that President Trump was applying to ensure what he used to say, a quick end to the Ukraine war. In his elections, for example, he used to talk about 24 hours to finish Ukraine war. With that backdrop, of course, one could say that the achievements of the first summit are limited. And only major thing they achieved is that they have kick-started a peace process which might continue in subsequent summit meetings. Now, if you look at what President Putin or Russia achieved from the summit meeting, I think the most important was the fact that for about 3.5 years, President Vladimir Putin had faced an externally imposed isolation, especially after the warrants issued by International Criminal Court, and he's not been traveling to any other country other than 1 or 2 very friendly countries. In that sense, this visit to United States, world's superpower, and being hosted in United States marked a major breakaway point for President Putin. He had last visited the United States in 2007. And even during that visit, the body language with President Barack Obama was very different. Let me say, relatively stiff compared to very friendly body language of President Trump in welcoming President Putin to Alaska. Second, President Putin also managed to ensure that initial indications from President Trump that he would like to see President Zelenskyy joining their summit and making a trilateral summit. Did not happen. So President Zelenskyy stayed away, was kind of kept away in this sense. And so are European allies, slightly kept away. Indeed, President Putin in his press briefing went to the extent of saying that he would like to see that neither Ukraine nor European countries, quote unquote, sabotage this peace process which has started between him and President Donald Trump. So in that sense, I think it was a bit of a success for President Putin, both at home, in that sense being recognized internationally. And I think this also sets the stage for his soon to happen visit to China to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit meeting in Tianjin, where he, of course, is also likely to meet, he will meet Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So I think the summit meeting was an important event with several takeaways for President Putin. With President Trump, I think the story was slightly different because of his whole hype that he had created during his election speeches, saying that he would end a Ukraine war in 24 hours, or he will end it in the very first day of his inauguration in White House. And the constant, maximum pressure strategy of, even while flying to Alaska, saying that there will be severe and serious consequences in case President Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire. And now with that background, I think the achievements of President Trump looked relatively muted. Also, especially because he kept on using superlatives of the way he described this summit meeting as a success story. And I think in that sense, only the major clincher for President Trump is legitimization and representation of being the representative or leader of Western world, speaking on behalf of Ukraine and European countries. That definitely stood out clearly, that he still speaks on behalf of much of the Western world and, seeks to find solutions vis-a-vis Russian leadership, directly talking face to face. Now, as far as Ukraine is concerned, and of course also several European allies of Ukraine, they stood a bit of marginalized. Indeed, there were protestations from both Ukraine and several European countries that had issued a joint statement on last Saturday, saying that territorial swaps should not happen. Indeed, no concessions should happen without President Zelenskyy sitting on the big table with them. And of course, President Zelenskyy had also issued his videos saying that Ukraine is not willing to surrender any part of its territory. We all understand that currently Russia occupies about 20% of eastern Ukraine, the Donbass region, which includes Crimea, which Russia had captured in 2014, and more recently during this war for 3 years, since February of 2022, areas which Russia has captured. And indeed, Donetsk and Luhansk regions have been declared as independent republics recognized by Russia. Russia has indicated to make concessions on some territories which it is claims to be in control of, but willing to return to Ukraine in return of the territories that today Ukraine controls in Russia, which are very few and limited. So in that sense, Ukraine felt, we are saying, marginalized, and so also European countries felt marginalized, and they did not think that President Trump should be in a hurry to see territorial swaps as a way of solving the problem just bilaterally between him and President Vladimir Putin in that sense. The good side now is that President Trump has, after the summit, spoken to media. He has briefed several of his European allies, leaders, and also briefed President Zelenskyy, which is setting the stage now for the next possible summit meeting between President Trump and President Vladimir Putin. And if we recall, during his first term, his three back-to-back meetings with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, President Trump is perfectly at home with the back-to-back quick summit meetings with leaders where he thinks he can clinch a deal. So we are all looking forward to that as a possibility. But let's now look at what it meant for India. And it looks like, as of now, the summit meeting has mixed signals for what it means, whether it can provide any indication of relief possible for these maximum tariffs on Indian exports to United States. Of course, answering Fox News on issue of tariffs, he did say he doesn't have to think about it for 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how good the summit had gone with President Putin, which indicated that perhaps status quo could continue, but no further additional penalty could be imposed on India. But the bigger reality of now, the India-US trade talks, the 6th round of these talks is to happen in New Delhi during 26th to 29th August, which media is now saying is getting into a bit of uncertainty. And also the fact that 7 months after inauguration of President Trump into White House for his second term, the ambassador to India is not even nominated as of now. And so is the story of uncertainty about President Trump visiting India to attend this year's summit meeting of Quadrilateral Security Framework, which India is hosting this year. And that gives a sense that there is a bit of discomfort, and it's increasing discomfort between India and United States, and that would impact how President Trump will use his favorite tool of weaponizing tariffs against countries that he feels agitated about. He's clearly miffed by the fact that on May 10th, to be specific, he had claimed having done mediation in ending India-Pakistan military confrontation of May 7 to 10, which of course India has repeatedly now negated, including by issuing statements. And he has also continuously, about more than 36 times, continued to claim that he did mediation in India-Pakistan military confrontation. Later in June, he was supposed to have a meeting with the Indian Prime Minister during the G7 summit meeting in Canada. The fact that President Trump left that meeting earlier than the plan was, the Indian Prime Minister and the American President could not have a bilateral there. And then, of course, immediately President Trump had invited Indian Prime Minister, who was on his way back to India from the summit, to have a stopover in Washington, D.C., which could not happen because of Indian Prime Minister's tight schedule and then prior engagements. And since then, one has seen President Trump indulging and cultivating Pakistan, and particularly Pakistani military, emboldening them. And we have seen Pakistani leaders and particularly Field Marshal Asim Munir making fairly strong, provocative statements impacting India and against India. And that has added to the difficulties and challenges between India and United States relations as to how the two can really work on this issue of tariffs, which is the main bone of contention as of now. And in that sense, we are also now hearing the possibility of Indian Prime Minister visiting New York to address the UN General Assembly session, as every year Indian leaders go and address. And there is a possibility then that Indian Prime Minister could have a bilateral with President Trump. And the fact that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump's meeting would happen after Indian Prime Minister's visit to China to address and meet and participate in Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit meeting, which is likely to see him having bilaterals with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping, and maybe even other leaders like leader from Iran, etc. With that backdrop, the meeting with President Trump in late September could perhaps see that certain give and take could happen in resolving some of the major irritants on issue of a trade deal between India and United States. Apparently, India is very determined to not have clear, open, free access to American exports, especially in labor-intensive sectors like agriculture and dairy. And India has seen Prime Minister Modi repeatedly mentioning that interests of Indian farmers will be protected at all costs. India currently, especially from 27th of August, is likely to have 50% tariffs on its exports to United States. So if there is a possibility of the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump leading to some kind of understanding, pushing trade negotiations forward and ultimately achieving a trade deal by sometime early October, there is hope that then perhaps the tariffs on India could also be lowered to between somewhere 15 to 20%. But these are things that we are going to wait and watch and see how they unfold in coming weeks. And of course, we will keep you updated with the developments in international events through our several coming editions of Spotlight. And of course, we always look forward to your feedback on our discussions. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Thank you.